This one's strong.
It is over. One way or another. Neji. And Sasuke. And I am not going to be the only one to lose here.
To protect and maintain one's own ninja way.
What's good, guys? It is GN151515 in this bitch. We are back at it again with the white vans. I know it's been a hot minute of us doing a Naruto video. Hope you guys enjoyed the intro as well. But we're here, and as you guys can see in the title of the video, this is going to be discussing Rock Lee in particular, of just basically how far he scales, the common misconceptions with the character, even the weird hate that the character gets, or the misunderstood mentalities that people just would present with the character. And you know, at the end of the day, it's unfortunate, but a lot of people just tend to overlook Rock Lee, and it's understandable. The guy like has the worst haircut in the series. Like he literally, you know, has big ass eyebrows. You know, typically when he's like presented through the show, he's kind of like seen as like a joke in a way, you know. But when you truly analyze the character and hyper focus on him, he has incredible feats, incredible statements, and he truly was the personification of hard work and a genius of hard work as well itself. And throughout the narrative of Naruto, at least during part 1, Shippuden is not, he doesn't have as many showings as typically, you know, he did in part 1. He has a lot of really impressive showings, and I think it's just really important to dissect this character and analyze his full potential, what he was truly capable of, how far he scaled through the, you know, Naruto part 1, and just basically to give you guys a general consensus and idea of what he truly was capable of. And this is just good overall to understand for any of the Rock Lee fans out there, or better yet, for anyone that just doesn't respect the character enough, or thinks he was like not strong, or just at least, you know, throughout certain strength requirements, especially when we're talking about the tuning exams or the Retrieval Arc and things like that. Normally it's a lot straightforward, and people typically do agree that Rock Lee was at least, you know, the strongest, or like that guy, at least during the preliminary, you know, and things like that, or even before the Forrest of Death and tuning exams, especially when he's like over here beating up Sasuke. So, but overall, guys, you know, we're gonna be getting into this video, and no further ado, and I hope you guys really enjoy. Let's get it. See, in this first scan that we have Rock Lee like intervening with Sasuke, and basically he's blocking a kick. And, you know, Sakura's like, wow, he's so fast, whatever you name it. And Sasuke's even impressed by it. He's like, he blocked my kick, but there's something weird about his chakra, which is just right off the whip, because there's also like a common misconception that Rock Lee like apparently like doesn't or can't use chakra, or can't utilize it, which is just blatantly false. He is able to incorporate chakra within his taijutsu attacks, you know, or just obviously do normal taijutsu attacks, which only like require stamina. And this is just the first showing that he has in being capable of doing and utilizing taijutsu with chakra. And most importantly, the foundation of the gates just utilize chakra, releasing your limiters and having way more access to like a higher levels of chakra flowing through your body. So there's that as well. But regardless, this is the first thing I wanted to kind of put out there for, you know, Rock Lee in particular. And then as you can see in this particular scan, guys, we see where Rock Lee utilizes the second gate, and even Sasuke like questions it, and he's like, what the heck? He's like, his bruises have already healed. So this is another thing that people just typically forget about Rock Lee, that he's able to utilize the second gate, which not only boosts his strength, but is able to recover like his stamina and like his any damage that his body may have, like, you know, been affected by, whether if it was inflicted by a ninja, or if it's like him using like gate 1 or anything like that, where he becomes like exhausted and fatigued because of his muscles being, you know, fully ripped apart and drained, and things like that. So this is something else I did also want to point out about Rock Lee. He's very capable of utilizing the gates, the second gate, and being able to do it on the fly, recover, whether if it's, you know, his fatigue, or if it's just like actual injuries that he has. So again, like, a lot of people don't know about this, but Rock Lee does have the ability to heal and to basically recover from, you know, fatigue. So, but just kind of want to put that out there. And eventually this is shown in the Gaara fight, and we'll, you know, also go over that. But yeah, like that's just referencing the second time he did use it, which was against Gaara. So to further get into Lee's scaling and just to see how impressive he is overall as a shinobi, we do see his interaction in the preliminary during the training exams, and this is basically before they all start like the Forrest of Death event. Rock Lee basically just wants to have like a sparring match with Sasuke just to prove that like his hard work can be superior to geniuses, and it's basically just the emphasis of like where people with hard work that lack like genetics, you know, or talent or better yet just considered to be like a natural genius. His whole thing is to prove that his ninja way and his hard work can overcome and surpass the genius with hard work. And that even if you're a failure, you know, or lack certain things, that you could still be able to surpass geniuses, people like Neji, Sasuke, etc. You know, and it's always an interesting thing to think about because people normally, like, for some reason will have confusion around this or be like they never understood why like there's always the claim of Rock Lee like surpassing geniuses or whatever, and they'll be like he never did, which that's just blatantly not true. We see it throughout the narrative. He does it throughout the entirety of part 1 where he's surpassing people like Neji and Sasuke and so on and so forth. He does it early on in the preliminaries, and he does it even further on during the training exams and the Retrieval Arc. So you know, it's blatantly been a thing. But either way, as we first see is like Lee's interaction, and Rock, you know, he just deals with Naruto's first attack with ease. He just deals with him with one blow and effortlessly no diffs him and knocks him out. The next thing you do see right after that is Sasuke having his engagement, and where Rock Lee's boasting, saying he's like the greatest fighter, you know, of all the ninja in Konoha Village, whatever. And Sasuke, you know, he thinks about the time when they last interacted where he stopped my kick, and he understands this guy's really strong after he dealt with Naruto and just no diffed him. He's like, he stopped my kick with his arm. No human alive can do that. Don't know what techniques he's using, but I want to find out. And he said this could be fun. I accept your challenge, basically willing to fight Sasuke. And then the fight just continues from there. And he's like, he goes to deal with Rock Lee. He's like, above me, whatever. He's like, no time to duck, gotta block, whatever. And then Rock Lee just continuously speed blitzes him. And this is weighted Rock Lee, remind you. This is not without weights, gates, or anything like that. And he's just completely destroying Sasuke. And Sasuke just says, like, how did he get under my guard? You know, is this martial arts, or is it magic, or an illusion? Like, what's going on? And things like that. And the fight continues on. And basically, he activates his shotgun to try to see like what Lee's potentially doing in order to land like attacks on him. And then Lee like activates the first gate. Now, to be fair, at this particular moment, it is questionable or whether or not if Lee was using the first gate. He could have just been utilizing the taijutsu sequence and martial art moves just to, you know, hit Sasuke in the air and then like, you know, then bring him down or whatever. Because let's be real, if he was to use the first gate and do the Lotus, that would be overkill, and that would literally kill Sasuke, and Hidden Leaf Ninja are not gonna like be having death matches against each other. You know, like they would only be fighting as for sport and for competitive value. So like there is all that you can put into question, and however you want to analyze it, that's totally up to you. But regardless, it's either him utilizing the first gate while weighted or without the first gate, and he just speed blitzes Sasuke, bullies him, makes him bleed. And Sasuke is just very like confused. He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't understand. And Lee just explains it to him. He says, that's right. No ninjutsu, no trickery. My moves are strictly physical. Hard as you may find it to accept. If your Sharingan eye can see to the heart of every ninja art well enough to duplicate it as it is said, then you know what I say is true. I'm sure your Sharingan is valuable against arts like ninjutsu and genjutsu, which with their formalized rules, sign casting and chakras. But physical taijutsu arts and their pure form are a very different story. And he says, but how? And Lee explains it and says, even if you can perfectly perceive and understand my movements, you lack the speed and strength to counter them. You haven't had the physical training necessary to keep up with me. It doesn't matter what your eye can see if your body is too weak to act. And this is a very, very important statement future on for Rock Lee as well, because there is eventually a point, you know, where people like get into the whole thing of, you know, oh, you can't charge at people, you know, and do like a beeline attack, or it's too easy to counter, avoid, and all this stuff, whatever, so on and so forth. So eventually there will be relevance to this particular scan, but this is very important. Do keep this in mind, because this is, you know, again, like even if Sasuke is able to perceive Lee or see him, whether if it's, you know, 2-tomo, 3-tomo, whatever, if his body's too weak to react and Lee's just outscales him massively, whether if it's speed and power, whatever the case may be, he's not gonna be able to do anything. He's basically cooked, you know. So again, do keep this in mind. We see this is like after the fight with Sasuke and Lee, and Guy appears basically, and he's like, "Oh, it's Kakashi's team and whatnot." That's like the context that's going on, and he basically says, "I'm stronger than Kakashi," and Sasuke's like, "He's so fast, his speed is much greater than Kakashi. Is he even human?" And basically, he's like, "Who is this guy?" He claims he's better than Kakashi, and I don't think he's bluffing. And this is just further consistency and substantiation that, again, Lee and even people like Guy, who is literally the exact replica of Lee, but just a stronger version of him, like, these guys, just through what hard work and utilizing the gates, are even able to surpass geniuses like, you know, Sasuke, Kakashi, Neji, and etc., and so on and so forth. So, again, this is like really, really impressive because this is consistently shown throughout. And people typically try to have skepticism within this particular scan and be like, oh, well, Sasuke never saw like Kakashi using Raikiri, or, oh, this could just be body flicker and not, you know, like Kakashi's speed, and just really weird, like, you know, skepticism applications, which doesn't follow through and doesn't logically make any sense, because when we go back to the Zabuza fight, you know, when Kakashi's fighting him, it's a life and death battle. They're both bloodlusted. They're both ready to like, go at it. You know, they're about to kill each other and whatnot. They're having several taijutsu exchanges. They're moving as fast as they can. And it's literally impossible to try to prove whether or not if they're using body flicker or just a normal physical taijutsu speed, because there is 2 levels of taijutsu speed. And that is like just blatantly shown within Naruto. That is correct. You do have physical speed, what you can utilize just like your normal speed, and then you can hone your speed to the maximum, which kind of gives the deception of teleportation, basically, which is aka body flicker. And you know, it's just you utilizing your full chakra and speed, and then you're just going as fast as possible. And again, like that's like your maximum amount of output, right? So, like, overall, like, the main point being said is, even if you were to try to argue that, oh, this is just, like, Guy doing body flicker and Sasuke's never seen Kakashi's body flicker or whatever, again, you can't prove that. Like, it's a claim you can make, but it's, like, very unlikely, and there's not any way to substantiate of, like, Sasuke not seeing Kakashi body flickering, or Zabuza, like, not doing it. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, if ninja are in a death match, they have all the incentive in the world to go at it and utilize their full maximum speed and capability. You know, and if worse comes to worse, like, if that's not enough, then they'll just heighten their speed further and use body flicker, right? And then there you go, you know? So overall, like, that's just not correct. And we've seen it throughout, like, consistency-wise, like, through Naruto as well. Minato using body flicker if his physicals isn't enough. Shishui using body flicker if his physicals isn't enough. You know, there's many shinobi that can try to weaponize and utilize the body flicker to then overcome their opponents and just outright, you know, outspeed. And we've seen it so many times. Minato against the Nine Tails, Minato to save, you know, infant baby Naruto, so on and so forth. So I really wanted to give this scan a good, like, you know, analysis, because for some weird reason people just like to, I don't know, just be weird around it. So, but yeah, there's that. And then as for the Raikiri Kakashi, that's fine. That's perfectly reasonable, because that is correct. Sasuke never sees Kakashi using the Raikiri. But overall, the main issue with that as well, in particular, is, again, this would just bare minimum show that Guy in base, and compared to Kakashi's base, he's just way greater, and overall he's just stronger, which makes sense because that particular Kakashi is also rusty, and at a certain point, especially after his fight against Kabuto, he realizes how weak he's become and how people are catching up to him, and he starts training, and he even concedes and acknowledges himself that he's really let his body get weak and he needs to get stronger, you know. And then eventually, once we get to like the Konoha Crush arc, that's when you could be able to argue, or at least bare minimum when he's like having his fight against Kasame and Itachi, that he's finally reaching like his prime peak. And at that point, you could probably say now he would be equal to Guy in base, and so on and so forth, you know. But either way, however you guys want to go about that, I thought this would just be an interesting moment to kind of put in discussion, and so on and so forth. But there's that. And then most importantly, if you guys haven't checked it out, I'll put in the description down below. There'll be a link, but I do explain how Chidori and Raikiri works, and whether or not if it's a speed amp, whether if it's a small one or no amp at all, and so on and so forth, or if it is a massive amp. So if you guys want further detailed analysis on that, feel free to check out that video. But you know, to keep it short and simple, for what we see consistently wise with the Raikiri and Chidori is that it's either no amp at all or it's a small one. Because we have tons and tons of feats of Kakashi or Sasuke to where they're fighting their opponent, they're going blow for blow, and then they do the Chidori and Raikiri, and they're still moving at the same speed against their opponent. Or their opponent can still react and dodge the Raikiri or Chidori, or they could force an equal clash and deal with it, you know? And then it's even just consistently shown that they have to set up moves to even like land a Chidori or Raikiri, or try to land it. Kakashi against Zabuza does the dogs. You know, Sasuke is, you know, doing fire style and also CM1 activation to amp himself in order to try to create an opening, things like that, you know, so on and so forth. So again, like, there's just tons of consistency to where they either need jutsu to try to land it, or they just hope, you know, to God that their precog with the Sharingan, whether if it's 2-tomo or 3-tomo, that it'll be enough to see the counter attack, and then they can counter accordingly and successfully land the attack. So, but anyways. But let's move on to the next thing. Okay, so the next thing we get to analyze Lee in the Forrest of Death, and this is during the, you know, Chunin exams, and he's basically having to fight against like the Sound Ninja, that's like a part of Orochimaru's henchmen, and basically they're going to charge at Sakura and kill her. And so the next thing we see is then Lee intervenes and he lands like a Konoha Hurricane technique on all three of them, remind you. So he like literally blitzes all three to protect Sakura. This is really impressive because, mind you, this is weighted Lee. He's not using any gates, or, you know, it doesn't take his weights off or anything like that. And to be fair, yes, you could argue that like their attention was on Sakura and they were trying to attack her, but at the same time they're still in a combat situation, so their awareness is going to be alert, and Ninja plenty of times are able to respond to an attack coming from the side, in front, or from behind, and so on and so forth. Like the entire like emphasis of what makes a ninja is to be prepared at all times and to try to deal and counteract your enemy's attacks, you know. And we know ninjas can do substitution, shadow clones, all kinds of ninjutsu, etc., etc. The sky is the limit. So this would still fall through for scaling, or for it to be valid, and it just makes sense. Like, there's nothing wrong with this, you know, and so on and so forth. So like that wouldn't necessarily be an excuse. So again, you could try to argue that this is an off-guard moment, but really, like, it's just really hard to substantiate that, especially when ninja have consistently been shown to react to attacks coming out of, you know, from another angle, or someone else like trying to attack and intervene as well, or just ambushes, you know, which is multiple people as well. So, you know, there's that. But again, even if you consider this off guard, it's still pretty impressive. So the next thing that we do get to see with Rock Lee is just further like really impressive feats that he's able to do. And mind you, this is while he's still weighted. So Dozu tries to like basically strike and attack him, and Rock Lee literally just like puts his arm under the ground and starts lifting out like freaking roots and trees, like doing like some insane physical like feats. Like that's just not even human at all. Like that's some superhuman level like crazy strength. And like Dozu even like comments on it, you know, and so on. And so he's like, I've seen you use these moves before, and then Sakura's like, he's so strong, you know. So like again, like this Lee just has like ridiculous strength and speed, and it just goes to show how very impressive he is, to where he can just like again pull roots or like trees out of a freaking ground and just utilize it as a shield to defense against people's like attacks and so on and so forth. So again, just really impressive from Lee, and no one's ever like demonstrated or shown like strength feats like this, so it's just very impressive, you know. And to be fair, maybe he could be doing this with the potentially with Gate 1 or not. We don't really know. We don't get any emphasis of if he's using Gate 1 or not, but either way, since we don't know, we could just objectively conclude that he's weighted bare minimum and he's able to replicate this feat. So it is very impressive. And the next thing we start getting into is basically like the explanation and analysis of Gate 1 and how the first gate operates with Rock Lee. And this is really impressive for him as well, because he was the only one to master the technique, to where Guy literally says ultimately only Lee was able to master this technique, which was the primary Lotus attack, which requires the first gate. And it's a very big deal because Guy tells him now that you mastered the Lotus technique, it will be classified as one of the forbidden arts. And this is very serious, because whenever a jutsu is considered forbidden, you know, and so on and so forth, it's basically like it's such a risky jutsu or so dangerous that it could potentially kill the user or put the user at death, especially if they're engaging a battle or in war. So therefore, it's not really like recommended to utilize or do, only really as a last resort or like your final trump card if you have like no choice whatsoever, you know? So again, it's like very, very impressive. It's considered a forbidden technique. And just further emphasis and explanation with the first gate and how the primary lotus operates is it's an art that draws its power directly from energies locked within the wielder's cellular structure. And when you call upon it, you're sacrificing basically a part of yourself. And normally human beings can only utilize a mere 20% of their own muscular energy. And if anyone were to employ anything even close to 100% of the strength in his muscles, the muscles themselves would quickly break down, so the brain sets a limit on how much of our muscle power we are willing and able to use. And the secret of this technique is in overriding that, basically the brain part where it's for the safety feature, you know, giving the wielder access to all of his own chakra and muscle capacity. And dangerous as it is, though, it is the result is the release of enough muscle power to enable the wielder to perform a series of grueling and demanding tasks at an incredible speed, pushing his own body to the limits of safety and beyond. So it's like a double-edged sword, and this is eventually further explained when Lee's like having his fight against Gaara as well, when Kakashi and Guy are further given analysis and explanation on it. But again, this is just a basic consensus of how it works and operates. And this technique is no joke because it is an insane speed amp. It's ridiculous how fast it makes Rock Lee. It literally makes this man be like a speed blitz tier above his opponents consistently wise as well. Like it's extremely rare for someone to like a combat against Lee, right, in his base, and then Lee goes first gate and then he can't land the attack. Like, it's very, very rare. And there was only one particular individual that was able to do that, which was Kimimaro. But to be fair, that guy is, you know, he's Kimimaro. And two, there was also further context surrounding that of why he was able to do so, which we will eventually get into all of that. But, you know, again, this is very, very impressive for Rock Lee. And he utilizes the first gate, charges at Dozu, and basically speed blitzes him and initiates the Lotus process. And it just basically goes from there. And then, you know, he utilizes the Lotus, he turns in like a crazy amount of speed, creating like a whirlwind tornado, like straight downward, utilizing the laws of physics and gravity to also aid him to increase his AP output value. And after he does that, Dozu does get saved by Zaku with his air sonic move. But even Dozu still commented and said like that's a really, really dangerous technique because even though he cushioned the blow, that attack still almost wiped me out, you know. And then Dozu tries to basically attack, Rock Lee again. And Rock Lee, mind you, like when he uses the first gate, he's completely gassed out. Like he just says like I'm toasted, I'm all out, you know what I mean? And he could still try to fight back against Dozu. And Dozu's like impossible, like you shouldn't be able to move, like, you know, and whatnot. And he just blocks his kick or whatever, and then he says like my last attack is finally showing some effect. But as the fight goes, Dozu kept on like utilizing Rock Lee's disadvantage, which was going after Sakura over and over. And basically Rock Lee didn't have any time to like, you know, either use the gate 2 or to go into further gate transformation and so on and so forth, like, which is why he basically just gets, you know, subdued in this fight. And it makes sense. Like, whenever ninja, or just in anything, in any fictional show, movie, you know, anime, manga, whenever people are utilizing civilians or hostages, you know, in a fight, it does put your opponent at a severe disadvantage, especially if you do scale to the person. And even if they have the ability to scale over you, like, if you have a hostage or you're about to kill someone, like, you have to either obey the threat or you have to, like, react right there and then, otherwise they're going to die, you know? So Dozu takes advantage of this, and Sakura is just useless in this fight, and, you know, so he has to get in front. He's still able to block Dozu's attack, which is insane. And mind you, he's weighted, you know what I mean? He's extremely fatigued, weighted at this point, and he could still fight against his Dozu, which, again, is just really, really, really impressive for Rock Lee. But once Dozu hits the attack, he utilizes his sound, then he subdues Rock Lee. And then the conclusion of the fight, like, 1010 even gives her opinion and thoughts, and just flat out says, like, you know, like, oh, for crying out loud, if Lee, faced those guys by himself with no distractions, he could have taken them. So even, like, there's this further narrative emphasis that, like, Rock Lee could have beaten all three of them. You know, now, the only thing that is questionable and arguable is whether or not if it would be, like, you know, with the gates, or if it would be, you know, with you know, taking off his weights, you know, and things like that, or just even weighted. Like, that's the interesting thing to think about. But overall, he had many options to do so. You know, whether if it's him going all out with the gates, or if it's him taking off the weights, which that's really all he would need to do. I don't think it would be necessary for him to use the gates. I think that's overkill. He would just simply just take off the weights and then just beat them all up, you know, or he could just strategize with the gates and so on and so forth. But again, because Dozy was taking Sakura as hostage, there's only so much Lee could do, and he had to basically act right on the fly, you know. And then not only that, it's eventually explained in the Gaara fight that one of the conditions for Lee to take off the weights is if he's trying to protect someone he cares about or loves. And he's trying to protect Sakura, so that condition would follow, and he would be able to take off his weights and go from there. So there's that as well. Anyways, all right, so the next fight that we eventually see, and this is just where like it gets really, really impressive for Lee's scaling, because so far everything that we discussed before is just like the bare minimum things that Lee's doing, and just going over why that's impressive as well. But this is where like Lee really shines during part 1 in Naruto, and to where basically why he just literally becomes the strongest of Konoha 12. You know, or just blatantly just superior to all the Gennin within the Konoha 12. But yeah, so this is shown during his Gaara fight when he's going against Gaara. And the first thing that we get to see that occurs within this fight is he's fighting in his weighted form, but he's not really getting anywhere. But you know, he's basically fighting against the sand shield, and the sand shield's equal to him, right? And Gaara's like, without even moving a muscle, like he's not taking any damage. You know, and then Sakura's like, as fast as he is, like Lee's getting nowhere, right? That's basically how it goes. But basically what happens, Guy, you know, gives Lee permission, and he's like, take off the weights on his legs. And he's like, Master Guy, but you said never to do that unless I was defending the lives of people who are precious to me. And literally Guy's like, yeah, you're right, bro, but for this would be an exception. I want you to beat his ass, basically, you know? And Kakashi's like, okay, that's, you know, some kind of tradition, kind of training, like, interesting, you know. And then Rock Lee's like, I can finally move freely or whatever, you know. And he basically does that. And then Tamari's like talking shit, you know, but she's like irrelevant. Like, she has no business even saying nothing, because she's like would get destroyed by Gaara in this particularly as well. But she's like, you know, there's no way dropping a few weights will let you keep up with Gaara's sand or whatever. So he drops the weights, and then when he does that, there's like a big, crazy, like, explosion and dent. It's like the weights are kind of like a mini fucking Rasengan or Chidori in a way, which is kind of funny. But, you know, yeah, it caused like a big destruction hole and whatnot. And then Kakashi, even he's like, aren't you overdoing it, Guy? You know, he's like, oh, hell no. And then everybody's like, oh, shit, like, that's a lot of weight that he was putting on his body, you know? And then he starts moving, and Kakashi literally acknowledges Rock Lee's speed. Like, mind you, he's a Jonin, you know? He's seen all these other fights, and you name it, you know, and he's actually acknowledging Rock Lee's speed. He's like, he is fast, you know, and he's like, he's almost touching Gaara, basically. And then he eventually speeds it up, because he does his first level speed, where he's not able to touch Gaara, but he's almost there. He ramps it up even further, and he's able to kick Gaara, like, straight down in the face. And everyone's blown away, you know, because this has never occurred or happened to Gaara. And then Guy literally substantiates in how, like, further impressive his feats are, because he says in terms of speed, Lee can't be surpassed. And this is a big deal, because we know how strong Neji is, and how capable Neji is as well. And eventually there's further correlation with Neji to Rock Lee, to where literally Rock Lee is required to use the third gate in order to defeat Neji, you know, anything from the third and above. So like, this is very, very impressive that Guy literally says Lee just can't be surpassed in terms of speed. And when we get eventually further into the series, this is just consistently shown with Lee based upon feats. And when we even get to the final tuning exams, not Kakashi or even Guy have the same like reactions or any statements or anything in any regard or form to indicate that anyone was able to perform on the same level that Rock Lee was against Gaara. So again, like, it's just really, really impressive as we get further through this fight. And the next thing that we see further on is Tamari is like, it's unbelievable that he's actually managed to wound Gaara, you know, and basically Naruto's like, he's gotten faster, he really is strong, he's blown away. And then Kankuro's like, no way, like, even he's blown away. And then Rock Lee just starts bullying Gaara. Like, he moves so fast in this particular scan to where he's like moving and Gaara's still looking at him, but before he could even turn his head to see what's going on, he gets punched right in the face and sent flying away. Like, it's just insane level of speed that Rock Lee's doing, where he's like creating after images basically with how fast he's moving. And then when Gaara gets like knocked all the way back, you know, basically Rock Lee's like, I'm wearing him down, and then Shikamaru's like, wow, like he's blown away, like everybody's blown away by his speed. And then Choji's like, his moves are so fast, my eyes can't even track him. So he's like perception blitzing Choji, which is hilarious. But yeah, and then we see like the damage he does to Gaara. Like you can see like his whole like face and like the whole sand armor on it, and it's like crumbling and falling apart. Like he does pretty heavy damage to Gaara, you know. And eventually it's explained further on from there. Kakashi announces it that he's mummified himself in the sand and the blows are barely touching him because of the sand armor. And then Kankuro starts actually getting worried because he's like, the other Gaara is now totally awake. If this Gaara is able to catch Lee, he's like, oh, this is not really going to be good. It's kind of going to be like a bloodbath type scenario is what basically he was getting at. And then as it furthers on, you know, then Gaara starts reapplying sand armor on his body and whatnot. And then Naruto's like, what's going on? And then Kankuro's like, it's some way of protecting himself from bushy brows. It's sand armor. And basically, as it further continues, he explains what the armor is. He's like, yes, Gaara can create a thin shell of sand to cover and protect its entire body, controlling it by force of his will. Differs from the sand shield, where they automatically flow to form a protective barrier. It's Gaara's ultimate defense. There's nothing Lee can do. It's got no weaknesses, and that's what Naruto says. But Kankuro says in his head, which is just like further like to prove that this would be very, very transparent and the honest truth. But he says that's not exactly true. The sand armor is actually riddled with tons of weak points, and it's his protection of a last resort, basically. And that's really a big deal and really, really important, because when, as we've seen, like when Gaara's in like his V2 state, which is like his second strongest state, besides like his full Shikaku possession form transformation, like Naruto was able to use a paper bomb on a kunai at one of his weak points, which is below his tail, the 1,000 Years of Death move, basically, and he was able to fuck up V2 Gaara, and that's like the second strongest form of Gaara, remind you, you know. So like this is a big deal because, you know, this is unfortunately like the downfalls of Rock Lee, and I'll eventually get into this a little bit further at a certain moment. But you know, Rock Lee never uses a kunai with a paper bomb, but honestly, that's one win con he could have done, and he could have simply just beat Gaara right there and then and blow up right through his armor sand. And it makes sense. We've even seen like in Shippuden when Gaara's fighting against Deidara does like a little C1 explosion clay bomb, and it's like a paper bomb basically, and it just lands point blank in Gaara's face and goes right through his sand armor, and bam, he was knocked out and incapacitated. So, but again, we'll further talk about like Lee's intelligence and battle like combat IQ and analysis, and like why that is like kind of like his downfall and where he's really weak at. But we'll get into that in a sec, but let's continue to analyze the fight. There's one last analysis, and he's basically saying it's not automatic. The way the shield is, it requires a massive outpouring of chakra. Its defensive strength is less than that of the sand shield. So the sand armor has way less durability, which makes sense. We see that consistently with feats, comparing the wall of sand and his sand armor. And since the sand itself is lying against his skin, it increases the weight of his body, so he has to expend more physical strength just to move, aka stamina and chakra. And if Gaara has been driven to using the armor, then right now his mind is purely on defense and he's been driven into a corner. He says that Lee is really something, but the end of this is a foregone conclusion because Gaara is a genius. And he goes back to like gassing up Gaara and being biased for him, you know, where they're both like utilizing a lot of chakra and stamina, you know, because Gaara's doing it with the sand armor and whatnot, and he's pushed into a corner. And he's strictly on defense. Rock Lee's also expending a good amount of stamina and chakra and whatnot. So basically, they're not really getting anywhere. And Rock Lee has to be like, you know, what can I do to overcome the sand armor? And basically, he's like, oh yeah, that's right. I have a very high-level AP attack that can literally break through the sand armor and defeat him. And Guy literally also just further reinforces it. He says the Lotus technique will let him strike his foe at his speed. A thin layer of sand won't stand up to it. And if that happens, he's wearing a thick shell of sand, it will be almost impossible for him to kick outward, in which case, you know, then he goes from there. And basically he activates the first gate, and this is emphasized because he's like running in a big like circle. There's like smoke everywhere and whatnot because of how fast he's going. And then Rock Lee basically goes and attacks him, kicks him, speed blitzes him, okay? and then he starts doing a crazy amount of taijutsu combos. And this is really important, and this is another common misconception that people have with Rock Lee and Naruto and just always overlook for some weird reason. The reason why Rock Lee wasn't able to kick Gaara straight in the air, because if he was able to, he would have actually defeated Gaara right here and then with the first gate alone. But the reason why he doesn't is because, remember, as stated before, Gaara has so much like weight on his body because of the sand armor. He's really heavy, and it's even hard for him to move, and which is why he has to expend so much physical energy and stamina and chakra to even move if necessary. So, like, Rock Lee is literally trying to kick like a really, really heavy weighted object basically into the air, you know, which is why he has to do all these combos and continue to kick him up in the air, because he didn't initially go all the way up like what normally happens when he does speed blitz his opponents. So, like, for instance, you know, when we're talking about people like Sasuke, Naruto, or any other character that's not a tank character, they would literally all get launched up in the air and then immediately subdued. Gaara is the only exception to the rule because of him being a tank and weighing a fuck ton, basically, you know. So again, like, there's always this thing where like people are like try to like argue and just disregard context, but like, oh well, Rock Lee couldn't defeat Gaara with the you know, with the first gate, or you know, with the fifth gate, right, with the, you know, primary lotus and then, you know, the other lotus attack. But that's not true. He actually would have defeated Gaara, but it was because of the weight discrepancy. And the only reason he doesn't defeat Gaara, because he would have still defeated Gaara even though he had to do all these combos, because he had to do these combos, he actually grunts in pain, and he closes his eyes, you know. And then Guy, great strain on the user's body. That many consecutive kicks may be too much even for Lee. You better make your next move a decisive one, kid. And then Gaara literally like capitalizes on this moment. When Lee grunts in pain and stops for one moment, that's all it takes is one moment. Gaara literally does body flicker and does a sand substitution and literally like swaps himself with a sand clone. And then Rock Lee does like the spin move, does like the lotus, he lands, bam. And then even like Conqueror's like, oh my god, like, you're kidding, right? Like, no way that he lost, you know. And then it shows Gaara like, you know, completely destroy like the sand and whatnot. And then Guy is like, when did he slip out of that shell? There's no way he could have gotten past Lee. And he said it happened when your eyes closed. In prayer, Guy, Lee paused in pain for just a moment, and that's when Gaara substituted himself. So, like, this, like, again, just, this only happened because Gaara. Gaara is the only exception to the rule of why this would be the case, okay? While everybody else would be launched up in the air and immediately killed, you know? Unless you're Neji, because Neji would technically scale beyond the first gate. But either way, you know, just want to kind of put that out there. So, like, if we're talking about any other character in the show, they would all get launched up and immediately subdued and defeated by just the first gate alone is AP, because it was strong enough to get through Gaara's sand armor, which is very, very impressive, you know. So, just kind of want to put that out there. But yeah, thing we get into, Conqueror starts freaking out and sweating. He's like, it's fully awakened, and he's referring to Gaara's Jinjuriki that's within him, which is the Shikaku. And he's basically like, you know, oh no, which is also very important, because just like when we see Naruto like get the Kyuubi eyes, like when he awakens the Nine Tails or whatever, it's basically the same equivalence. The only difference is Gaara's eyes don't change. His eyes don't change unless like he starts doing like the V1 transformation or V2. But when he's in his base, like, it basically, his demon can awaken, and just like with Naruto when he's using the Kyuubi and Demon Awakens, obviously that would just heighten Gaara even further, whether if it's, you know, his sand, speed, AP, all that, whatever, you know. So it's very impressive for Lee, because he pushes Gaara to, you know, for Gaara's inner demon to be awakened, basically. And this is very, very impressive, because Rock Lee is still able to tank and respond to all of these attacks, and he's perfectly fine. And then eventually, you know, Rock Lee is able to get his speed back by activating the second gate, and I'll eventually show that information as well and get into that. So the next thing we see, as I mentioned before, then Gaara's like inner demon awakens, as you guys can see in this particular scan above. Basically, the next thing we get into, and this is where like Lee just basically becomes like the strongest of everybody. It's literally at this point in time of why he just becomes such a severe threat. But the way it starts is with Guy, where he's, you know, basically he's smiling, and then everyone's like surprised because Naruto's like he's got his speed back or whatever, and basically Kakashi starts sweating from the statement that Guy says with the lotus blooms twice, and he's like, that kid who's just a Gennin, is he able to open the 8 inner gates? And he's like, yes, that's right. And then Kakashi's like, it's awful. And, you know, then Guy's like, he has the talent. And then Kakashi says, no matter how much talent he has, you taught him something horribly dangerous. Because that's how powerful the gates are. Like, that's how, even like Kakashi is getting like shook and like really serious about this situation. And the whole like emphasis of like Lee to use the third gate and above is under like one particular special condition. And basically, like, he even explains to Lee that like the Starbound Warrior is even more forbidden than the Lotus, and it would become a very special move in Lee's arsenal. Kakashi says it, and he's like, so he was able to bounce back from exhaustion with such abnormal speed because he forced open the second gate of rest, you know, which again, that's what the second gate of rest does. And this ties back to what everything we showed at the beginning of the video, to where Lee's not only able to use the second gate to heal his wounds, but he's also able to recover from his fatigue and the damage that his muscles sustained from using the first gate. So like, this man basically has a senso beam ability. Like, he could activate the first gate, be a speed blitz tier above his opponent, be broken, strong, and fast, and then just recover immediately activating the second gate. Like, that's just ridiculous. Like, which of the eight inner gates has he gotten up to so far? And Guy says the fifth gate. And then Kakashi's like, that feat should be impossible to achieve through hard work alone. So the boy is a genius after all. And this is a big deal, because this just goes to show like how capable and how incredibly talented Lee is when it comes to taijutsu, being a specialist in taijutsu, and honing his skills to be able to develop and utilize the gates. And this is extremely rare. It's very rare, shown consistently through Naruto, to where only certain ninja and individuals are able to develop this. It's like they either have like special conditions, or they just have like the right circumstances that just allows them to be able to do this. That area is particularly vague, but for some reason Guy's father, Guy himself, and then obviously Rock Lee, they were the only ones to get this far. And this is very impressive, because we have geniuses like Sasuke, Kakashi, Neji, where none of them were able to even access the gates or even get to this like further development, or as far as Lee or Guy is able to get, you know, or even Guy's dad. Extremely impressive, you know. And then basically Sakura's like, what are you talking about with these inner gates? And then, you know, basically it's explained that the gates act as limiters that must be released in preparation for performing the reverse lotus. And these limiters are basically limiters that, like, literally what it says itself, limit your power, you know, like the amount of chakra you can channel throughout your entire body. Okay, so every human has limiters, and unless they release those limiters, which is by accessing the gates, you can be able to access your full potential and power within your body. So there's that as well. And Kakashi says yes, he further explains it, and he's like, at 8 specific points through the chakra network of energy lines through which chakra flows, there are places where the chakra nodes converge, you know, which you have the first gate of opening, the gate of rest, the gate of life, pain, closing, joy, shock, and death. Those are called the 8 inner gates, and they constantly maintain limits on the amount of chakra to flow through the body, limits that the Lotus uses chakra to forcibly override, enabling the user to draw upon strength that is dozens of times his usual level, even if the user's body is destroyed in the process. Incidentally, the forward Lotus opens only the first gate. So again, like, this is really impressive, because that means Lee is getting dozens of times stronger with these gates, and that is insane. And it's further explained that if you access all 8 inner gates, you're able to get the power and surpass even the Hokage, but that person will inevitably die. And this is during like part 1 of like the analysis. Eventually when we get to Shippuden, depending on the user's power level, when you release the 8th gate, you could even get as strong as being 10 times stronger than the Hokage, or to even be a 6-pass level threat to fight against someone like Jubi Madara. So again, the 8 gates is no fucking joke. I even further explained, saying opening the first gate frees the user from his own mental limitations. The opening of the second gate boosts his strength and also gives you an abnormal like healing recovery ability, or to recover from like fatigue and muscles or stamina loss. Again, like a senso beam. And with the opening of the third gate, okay, one can begin the reverse lotus. And then Sakura's like, but wait, if the forward Lotus alone got him beat up, if he tries to perform any more moves, and then Kakashi's like, that's right, the technique truly is a double-edged sword. The state where all the gates, you know, and so on and so forth, and then he explains like what you could do when you release all 8. So from what we've gotten from this so far, is not only Rock Lee can get dozens of times stronger with utilizing the gates to the 5th gate state and whatnot, but if he releases all 8 gates, He could even have the power of the Hokage. And then most importantly, like, you know, all the gates have just explained. You know, the first gate makes him crazy, crazy fast and releases limitations with the brain, so he has full 100% muscle capacity. The second gate boosts his strength even further, so it makes him stronger, okay, and he's able to literally also have healing recovery abilities as well. So there's even that, which is crazy. So imagine if Lee was using like the first gate and the second gate combined. Technically, he would have actually not had the weight discrepancy issue with Gaara, and he actually would have defeated Gaara. So, but again, we'll get into the whole intellect thing with Rock Lee eventually as well. But, you know, there's that as well to put into consideration. But yeah, and that's just what you have. So then we get further, where we see Rock Lee, he starts activating to the third gate right away. He's like, I would not be the only one who fails. Master Guy, please notice me now of all times. Thinks of Neji and Sasuke and Naruto. And then there's the epic moment where he releases, where he kind of has like a Super Saiyan moment. And he's like, now when I finally attain my Shinobi's path, you know, and the third gate, you know, released. And mind you, like, everyone's sweating. Even Neji's like, oh my god, like, what the hell? And Kakashi, this is the most impressive thing about it. He had to not only use the 3-tobo Sharingan to be able to watch this Lee's movements, but he's like, okay, he opened the third gate, he's going to make his move. Okay, and then Lee activates the fourth gate, and then Kakashi is like like blown away, still sweating, and he's like, he's quite something. And Rock Lee takes one footstep, remind you. One footstep. And he blows up the entire fucking stadium. And is so powerful, he kicks Blitz's Gaara, right? And shoots him up immediately in the air. Like, he didn't have to do no taijutsu moves to do it. It just instant. It finally does what he's normally supposed to do, right? And then Kakashi's like, he's fast. Everyone's getting overwhelmed with the power. Like, everyone's like getting blown away and whatnot. You know, Kakashi's like, he's so fast. Like this emphasis of speed and power is never ever demonstrated. Not in the final tuning exams. Not in the Retrieval Arc. There is nothing that even shows this realm of power. Nothing. Not the statements. Not the perception. Not the power. Anything remotely. Like, it is blatantly illustrated that Rock Lee is literally the most powerful person we will see throughout the entirety of Part 1, when we're at least referring to all the Gennin, right? Of Konoha 12, okay? Gaara is technically an exception, because if we count his Shikaku, that's a whole other thing, right? But either way, like, this is a very big deal. But as we further get into it, then they're like, Gaara, where did he go? And then they're all like, look up. And then Choji's like, but what about Lee? I don't see him anywhere. And Lee's moving so fast, nobody can see him except for Guy and Kakashi with using the 3-tomo Sharingan. Okay? So, and then Sakura is like, now it looks like the sand just can't keep up. And this is when, like, Lee's like just moving so fast, it's kind of like he's in his own dimension. And he's just blitzing Gaara over and over and over. And Gaara's like, my sand armor is peeling off, you know? And then it continually has further feats, and then, you know, his muscles are being torn apart, and then Kakashi said if this goes any further, it's gonna be bad. And then Neji is like freaking out. He's like, but it's Lee, like, how did he get so? And basically what he probably would have more than likely said is strong, because of how powerful Lee is and the feats that he's demonstrating in the context of the fight. And then Lee eventually releases the 5th gate, and then Gaara says, my defenses are falling, is he even human? And then literally Lee says, hey Neji, this is a move I was keeping in reserve to use against you, but I'll give you a sneak peek. And not only that, like, Guy even further explains the whole purpose of this technique. And Tamari is like, the sand shield can't keep up. Much of the sand armor has also been torn away. This is not good. And Guy's like, the reverse lotus, a series of taijutsu perform at such speed that the attacker is untouchable. These rapid moves are Lee's key to winning the match and also to defeat Neji. There is no way the sand can catch up. And then that's when Lee starts doing everything for the final hit. And then he eventually hits Gaara straight down. And the only unfortunate part, which we'll actually get to, but before mentioning that, it's even more impressive because it does like a crazy like a shockwave from the AP, and then everyone's like blown away, like they can't really see and whatnot, and Shikamaru's like, it's so fast you can't even see. And then we start seeing Gaara's gore sand turn, like the gore turn into sand, and the reason why is because then Guy's like, don't tell me, and then Kakashi like, the gore is turning into sand, and Gaara uses it to cushion the blow of the gravity being against him with the laws of physics, and along with Rock Lee's AP that he hit against him to launch him straight down with physical impact and like blunt trauma force, basically. And Guy's like, the gore was made of sand. He used it to protect himself, and that's the only reason why Gaara survives. And when you look at this particular scan as well, when that happens, Gaara's like huffing and puffing. He's all like fucked up. Like he was on the verge of like defeat right there and then, or better yet, death, you know. And then it goes from there, and we know what happens. Gaara, like, does the sand barrier on him. And then Rock Lee, like, despite everything, like, Kakashi's blown the fuck away. Even Guy, he's like, I can't believe it. Rock Lee still gets up like the fucking goat, okay? And Kakashi's like, he opened 5 gates. His arm and leg were crushed. How can he still stand? And it was because he was literally unconscious. And Guy acknowledges that along with Kakashi as well. Like, this man has the most insane willpower feat out of anyone in Naruto. No ninja has stood up with their entire body completely fucked up from the gates, half their body crushed and obliterated, okay, and being unconscious. Nobody has ever replicated that feat of willpower. The closest person that's ever replicated any willpower feat, even remotely close to that Lee, but even Lee is still above in comparison, is when Naruto had all his chakra points hit, and he's basically like, and Neji's like, you can't move now, whatever, and then he gets like that mental ant moment, and he's able to like still stand up, and Neji's like, impossible, you know? And that's about it, right? Like, that's the closest someone ever comes to Lee, but Lee still has like the best willpower feat out of anybody. Better than Hashirama, Madara, you fucking name it. Nobody has ever gotten up while they're unconscious because of just of how devoted they are to the ninja way and just wanting to win a fight so badly, you know? So, like, Rock Lee is absolutely an incredible character. And even to this day, is like, even most people would even agree that, like, it's like in the top 3 or top 5 or at least top 10 out of all Naruto fights to ever happen of Rock Lee versus Gaara. And it was just such an incredible fight. Like, the emotions, the feels, just everything about it, it was just legendary, dude. And it kind of gave you, like, a Dragon Ball Z vibe as well, you know? And so then eventually on, we get a further time skip with Rock Lee, and it's basically like him trying to train while his body's all fucked up still, and he can't basically be, he can't be a ninja ever again. It was just stated before, like, towards the end of his fight with Gaara, that, like, he's just incapable of being a ninja because due to the injuries that he's sustained. But he doesn't believe in that. He doesn't give up, and he's still trying to work out and train, but his body's just so fucked up that he literally just passes out and goes unconscious. You know what I mean? Like, because he just can't. So, like, there's this as well. I kind of want to put this out there because for some reason there was another misconception that everybody says, oh, Rock Lee was training and that he was getting stronger and stronger even while, like, he was basically, like, a vegetable, you know what I mean, and couldn't be a ninja anymore. So, like, that just doesn't make any sense at all and doesn't logically follow because he literally couldn't train. He tried and then he passes out. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there too. That was always like a weird misconception that people always brought up or tried to say with Lee, but that's not true either. This is very important because this basically ties into the final tuning exams and all the feats and everything, and then like Sasuke's correlation, you name it, and Gaara's correlation, all that, and then eventually just like ties into the Retrieval Arc, which is the final conclusion of us getting a final analysis and, you know, and what Lee is truly capable of and what he's, you know, able to do. And basically this is really, really important because a common thing people try to do, and there's like a weird misconception to where people always try to bring up the data book to where like Gaara thinks of Sasuke as like his strongest opponent or whatever. So there's actually a reason to that, because people typically utilize that data book statement and then be like, therefore like Sasuke's the strongest because Gaara just thinks so, whatever, you name it. And not only is that contradicted by feats and statements on top of it, especially when you analyze like the entirety of the fight of Rock Lee against Gaara, you know, and then also analyze his Retrieval Arc feats as well, which is just further reinforcement and substantiation for Lee being above Sasuke. But just to put the cherry on the top, like Gaara's perception of strength is subjective. It's actually not objective, and he doesn't actually he doesn't ever remove his bias. He appeals to his emotions of what true strength is, and it's explained throughout these scans that I'm presenting. So the first thing we see is Gaara says, this is what I came up with. I exist to kill all humans other than myself, living in a constant fear, knowing that I might be assassinated at any moment. I finally found inner peace. By killing those who sought to kill me, I was able to discern a reasoning for living and justify my own existence. I would fight only for myself and love only myself. And if all other people exist to magnify that love, then there is no more splendid world than this one. They allow me to experience the joy of living for as long as there are people out there for me to kill. Okay, and this is really important because this is the first thing we see of Gaara's analysis of what of his reasoning to fight, and then what true strength really boils down to and correlates. And again, this is further substantiated because then we have a situation where we see Gaara actually talk with Sasuke while he's training with Kakashi for the Chidori, and he's like, you've got eyes just like mine, eyes full and spiraling over with hatred and intent to kill. You're like me. Do not forget that you are my prey. You who are strong, who are called Uchiha, who have friends and have a purpose just like me. By killing you, I'll erase all that, and then I will truly exist, and I can feel alive and be the strongest. And he says, you've got eyes that know real isolation, eyes that recognize it as the greatest pain in the world, and you try to kill each other, and where only the victors gets to savor the worth of his existence. And then Kakashi gives his input, but that's not what Gaara was getting at. He basically says, Uchiha, you know you actually desire it too, deep inside your heart. You want to confirm your worth of your existence. You're wondering, am I really as strong as I thought? Am I truly stronger than the opponent I faced with these hate-filled eyes of mine? So again, this is all about strength and perceiving the other one because of their hatred or their will to fight for themselves and develop themselves because of the darkness and the pain they've been through. Okay, and this is just further like substantiated even more to where Gaara says, is this all your existence is worth? Let me tell you, you are weak because you're naive and your hatred isn't not strong enough. The strength of one's hatred is the strength of one's will to kill, and the strength of one's will to kill is the strength of vengeance. Your hatred will never match mine. Do you understand? So like, again, that's why Gaara believes Sasuke is the strongest, and why he thinks people like Rock Lee or Naruto, who literally fight either for their ninja way or with the power of love and to protect the people they love, he thinks are weak and incapable, or they're like stupid or whatever, blah blah, because, you know, because of his trauma and his personal biases, okay, and his subjective view of what true power is. He believes that if you just fight for yourself or whatever, and then utilize your hatred and so on and so forth to do whatever, that will always be superior to the power of love and wanting to protect others, or just fighting for your ninja way, right? Which is why he didn't respect and acknowledge Rock Lee or Naruto when it came to power, or have the same emphasis. And then literally, like, the icing on the cake, Gaara just flat out says it. Like, he flat out says all that, even though all the scans I showed you are consistently proving this one notion. But he says right here, he's like, whether you fight for yourself or for others, you should only love yourself, only fight for yourself. That is the definition of the strongest one. Okay, now fight me, show me your power, just like when you took down Hyuga, I'll grind that power into nothingness. And he's referring to when Naruto used the Kyuubi's power, which is the monster itself, because Gaara also knew that Naruto has a monster within him, because they literally had a conversation about it where they both say, oh, we both got monsters, whatever you name it. So he only respects and acknowledges the hatred and darkness and the power of the Kyuubi, and not Naruto's whole concept of the power of love and fighting for others. So, like, I just kind of wanted to put that out there, because this is like another thing like everybody always overlooks, and for some weird reason always tries to jump to the whole data book, you know, and then be like, oh, therefore, like, you know, Gaara is facing his strongest opponent because he deems so whatever, blah, you name it, and like, there you go. Like, see, that's just not what it works. When you actually analyze the narrative and how Gaara is and how he perceives strength and whatever you name it, that's the reasoning. So it just, again, wouldn't follow through. And on top of it, with the feats and all the other statements, there's just tons and tons of evidence that would just contradict the whole point of Sasuke being above Lee as well. But just kind of want to get into that because it is relevant to the, you know, to Lee and him being the strongest and how strong Lee is in his scaling. Next thing that we get into, this is also correlates to Rock Lee, which this is basically Sasuke's scaling, so we don't have to go over Sasuke completely, and eventually I will make a video of like fully analyzing Sasuke's scaling and how actually strong he is, and where he like basically contends or compares to everyone else, especially when it comes to Konoha 12 or just anyone else in particular. But to keep this very simple and a general consensus, or just to keep this very short and concise, I guess, we're going to just only cover the things that are absolutely relevant in correlation from Sasuke to Lee. So the first thing we see is when Sasuke utilizes his max speed, a guy acknowledges it and says that's practically the same speed as Lee without his weights, you know, and then Sakura's like, it looks like, you know, just like Lee's taijutsu, even his speed is a lot greater than before, you know, and now normally when people like see this, they try to be like, oh, therefore like Sasuke is relative to Lee, or he's like right there, and now it just, since he has like the Sharingan, ninjutsu, etc., therefore like Lee just loses, you know, in the whole nine. Now that's not true, and the reason why is because not only is everybody able to see this Sasuke that's moving, Guy can see him, Kakashi's not having to use the Sharingan, the 3-tomo, Sakura, Choji, everybody can see this man's speed and movement. You know what I mean? So there's that. Like, again, there's no same emphasis of when Rock Lee is moving and like everything that he's doing. And most importantly, the key word in this is practically the same speed. So that means like he's either like you know, he's near or he's like almost there basically. And that's a big deal because since we don't get a quantification amount or value of like how close Sasuke is approaching the weightless Lee level of speed, there's no way to actually indicate if he's actually like super close or he's like in the middle, you know, or approaching. And a really good way to think about it, like a simple analogy, is like if I say like, you know, oh, I'm like, you know, I'm close to like, you know, a Burger King or whatever, but I'm like 30 minutes out or whatever, you know. There's a difference between like being super close, where you're like 5 or 10 minutes, you know, near, you know, or if you're like, you know, just like halfway there or close, you know, and you're like 30 minutes away. So again, because we don't have the quantification and we don't actually know exactly where Sasuke is, you know, there's no way to indicate that he is like right there and close to Rock Lee when it comes to weightless. And this is just further proven and substantiated in the Retrieval Arc, like blatantly and objectively, that Rock Lee, even in weightless, was way beyond even this particular Sasuke that was eventually approaching that level. But he was still nowhere near. He was getting there, but he was not near, you know. And another way, a really good way to look at it, it's kind of like the Sonning, where they're in like their next forms, like Sage Jiraiya or whatever, 100 Healing Tsunade, where like that's when they're starting to approach high Kage level instead of being mid Kage, but they're not there yet, right? They're still not a Minato level or Itachi level, etc., you know, or Nagato, you name it. So things like that. So that's basically all I'm getting at. But the next thing that we do see is eventually, like, after Sasuke beating up Gaara, very similarly like to what Lee does, where he's landing a lot of blows. You know, Lee basically says, like, you know, like, Sasuke's huffing and puffing, Gaara's huffing and puffing, he's on his knees, and then Lee's like, however, maintaining that speed still expends quite a lot of energy, doesn't it? You know, and then Conqueror's like, what are you going to do, Gaara? The Sand armor uses too much chakra, you can't keep going that long. So it's, again, it's very similar to what we see, like, with the Rock Lee versus Sasuke, not Sasuke, with the Rock Lee versus Gaara fight, to where Rock Lee pushes Gaara into a corner, you know what I mean? And they're both, like, you know, kind of like at a stalemate, and they're gambling at that point. And what did Rock Lee decide to do? He decided to do the primary lotus to end the fight, and then but in this particular instance, Gaara is like, all right, let me just start the transformation and transform to Shikaku, because this is not getting anywhere. It's like Rock Lee all over again. And Sasuke's you know, response to that was, all right, let me just use Chidori. He's not moving, my jutsu takes time to use, you know, and then I could just, you know, utilize my Sharingan, dodge attacks, and then hit him with the Chidori, you know? And that's basically what happened. So it's literally the same exact scenario, but obviously just different outcomes of what the people decide to do, because, you know, again, Rock Lee doesn't have ninjutsu, but Sasuke does, and same thing for Gaara, right? So, and the reason why Gaara doesn't do, like, his possession form, because this is another thing people always try to bring up, like, therefore, like, Sasuke was a greater threat or whatever. Gaara never brings up the possession form, because if he was to do that, that would be canceled. That wouldn't be allowed in the Chunin exams. Like, that's like him utilizing another form of power, a monstrous power. That's just not fair, and it just, like, doesn't, like, that doesn't even fit the rules of the Chunin exams. That's why Sasuke wasn't allowed to use the curse mark. That's why, you know, and then also, like, if Naruto went, like, on a rampage with the QB, then that would also be, like, you know, disqualified, and the fight would end as well. Things like that, like, that's just not allowed. Like, even Naruto using Sage Mode, if you count, like, anime filler, he wasn't even allowed to use Sage Mode against anyone, because that was just too, like, overpowered, right? You know, so there's just certain power, you know, levels, or certain things, like, you just can't use in the Chunin exams, because it kind of defeats the whole purpose of what, like, qualifies you to be a Chunin. So that's the first thing. And two, like, nobody's going to allow Gaara to go on a rampage and transform to Shikaku either. You know, like, the Jonin are not going to allow that, the Hokage, you name it. So, like, there's tons and tons of reasoning and logical explanations of why, like, Gaara is not going to transform against Lee. Well, in this particular instance, the Sand was actually having, we're going to betray the Konoha and attack Konoha and try to have a war with them. And it was actually part of the plan for Gaara to transform and turn into Shikaku to help aid Orochimaru, or the Kazekage, in his fight against the third Hokage, you know, and then basically try to win, because with Shikaku's help and the Kazekage fighting Hiruzen, then therefore, like, you know, they should be victorious. And that was the whole plan. You know, the only difference is Gaara just rushes into the plan because he doesn't care. He just wants to kill Sasuke, right? And it's just him being basically selfish. So just kind of wanted to put that out there. That's another thing, you know, to put into consideration. But as we further get into it, Rock Lee and Guy are confused, because they were wondering, like, you know, why, like, you know, Kakashi honed, like, Sasuke with taijutsu. He's like, I know Kakashi watched the match with Lee and Gaara. You know, he has got to know that taijutsu alone won't work against Gaara, when even Lee couldn't defeat then. So he's like, why did he have Sasuke hone his taijutsu? And we eventually find out the answer. And then we see further feats from Sasuke where he tried to, like, you know, attack Gaara before he, like, you know, covered himself completely in a ball of sand. But because he didn't have the two-tomo Sharingan on, he wasn't able to see the attacks when he did a beeline attack. And he got cut on his face and all around his body. And even his fist was bleeding because he couldn't, like, penetrate through the sand. So, like, this is another thing. There's another misconception when people try to, like, be like, oh yeah, Sasuke is a 5th gate Lee level, you know, and all this stuff, or gates level in power, just like in his, you know, base with his Sharingan or without Sharingan. That's not true, because if this man, like, was literally that level of power, then every blow he did to Gaara would literally kill him or incapacitate him. You know, like, so that's also just not correct. And he also is not able to penetrate the sand, you know, the wall of sand, or obviously a sand dome. So, like, there's that as well. So what he does, he concedes, and then he's like, okay, I need to go use the Chidori. And this is during the time where Baki the sensei, where he's like, Gaara, that fool, we don't know when they're going to give the signal, like, you shouldn't be transforming. And, you know, Tamari's like, never mind the plan. Is he going to, like, go on a rampage? Gaara. And then they're like, we probably need to get away from here, and so on and so forth, you know. So again, like, there's that as well. And then we see Sasuke doing his Chidori. He starts moving, and then Guy's like, I see that's why you had him focus on his taijutsu and increase his speed so much. And then Sasuke's moving with the Chidori, and he's still visible. Like, he's not gone, like, in a separate dimension like Rock Lee. Everybody can still see him. Sakura's like, wow, what move is that? That incredible noise, whatever. And then Guy's like, it's just a chop. And he explains what the Chidori is. He says it's reserved for assassination purposes. The secret is in the speed of the thrust, so basically the person utilizing their speed that they have, and the immense chakra produced by activating, utilizing the element of lightning. So basically, you're using the speed that you already have, and then using the lightning element, okay, and getting a crazy amount of chakra, and then which gives you like really, really strong AP by nearly focusing massive amounts of chakra into the hand, okay, and then according to that move, that's why it's called Chidori. It basically transforms into a blade that can cut anything. So that's basically what you're working with. So again, like, two things. One, you need to have a certain level of speed, okay, so utilize your own speed. Two, then you build a crazy amount of chakra and use the lightning element, and then it basically becomes a fucking crazy AP sword, you know? And then basically we get into the next thing. Now, this is a really important thing, because this is another misconception that people like to have for some weird reason with Rock Lee in comparison to Sasuke. So, like, Rock Lee says right here, like, I understand that if that had been me, I wouldn't have launched a head-on full-speed attack on my opponent like that, or rather, I couldn't have. A beeline attack is easy to counter or avoid, and I don't have the eye to perceive and see through that counter. So, this is the issue. What people do is they'll see this statement and be like, oh, Lee's conceded whatever, therefore he can't do it, so therefore, like, Sasuke's over, right? That doesn't make any logical sense. All Lee is getting at, which Lee is correct on this, a beeline attack is very easy to counter avoid. We consistently see that in Naruto. When Naruto uses the Rasengan, when Sasuke or Kakashi uses the Chidori, and so on and so forth, or when people are just doing normal taijutsu, right? Like, it could either be very easy to counter or avoid, okay? And all Lee is getting at is if you have the same scaling to your opponent, whether if you're either relative or equal to that opponent, and you just try to go at him like at full speed or whatever, and try to land an attack, you know what I mean? It's going to be too dangerous and too risky, and it's a gamble. And unless if you have the Sharingan, precog, okay, the eye to see and perceive and see through that counter, you're not going to be successful landing your attack, okay? That's all Lee's basically getting at. It's never under, like, the premise or context of, like, if you're way faster than your opponent that you can't do a beeline attack, you know, and so on and so on. So if you're just superior than your opponent and, like, speed blitz tier above, this wouldn't follow and this wouldn't be at all remotely valid, okay? He's only speaking under the present tense of if he's moving and he's comparable to his opponent, he wouldn't be able to do so because he doesn't have the Sharingan. And that's all it is. And we eventually see further substantiation for this as well, where Sasuke even himself says without the Sharingan, he would be dead. He never says, oh, without Chidori I'd be dead. He says without the Sharingan, he would be dead. Because of the speed discrepancy when it comes to Gaara and you name it. So. And then we see further on where Sasuke's about to throw down with Kankura, but we already know what happens. Shino comes and helps, whatever. But this is really important because this Sasuke reminds you already, like, you know, utilized a good amount of chakra with taijutsu and whatnot, and also used one Chidori against Gaara. So he's not at full power. You know, he is fatigued. And this Kankura felt confident enough to be able to fight him and engage, but again, we know what happens. So this is just further evidence to show that, like, the Sasuke was nowhere near, like, prime weightless Lee speed level, because if that was the case, then this particular Kankura would get beat the fuck up. Because this Kankura and Tamari, they were at least shown to either be in some, like, similar relativity regard along, like, the weightless, or bare minimum from what we do know objectively, Tamari was able to fight weightedly. And we see Shikamaru fighting Tamari and whatnot. And then Kankura, we know he scales similar to Tamari. So therefore, they would at least all be on a weightedly level, you know? So basically what I'm getting at is this particular Sasuke, it's very straightforward and very simple that he does not, you know, scale to prime weightlessly. You know what I mean? Again, he's just like, he's approaching that level of speed, but he's not there yet, you know? Which, it makes sense. So, like, by this time when he's fatigued and whatnot, he's basically weightedly level at this point. And again, that makes sense, you know? Further feats to where, like, Tamari's like, no way Sasuke is able to match and counter Gaara's enhanced attack, and this is when Gaara does, like, a partial transformation, and he hasn't done the one tail yet, which is his max V1 power, but he's basically just did, like, his hand or whatever, and he's just utilizing his speed, his own body speed, and along with like the partial imp that he gets from the Shikaku enhanced state. And Sasuke's able to utilize his Tutomo and another Chidori, and basically, you know, he succeeds and counters Gaara. And then it goes from there. Then Gaara gets pissed off, and then he does the One Tail state, which makes him even stronger. And Sasuke even acknowledges that. He says he's even faster than before. And Sasuke barely dodges it, but he gets like cut up. And if he got hit basically head on, he would have been killed right there and then. And Sasuke just right here just even says it flat out. He's like, I can't even dodge him without taking time to predict his moves using precog. So he's aim dodging. And he says, without the Sharingan, I'd already be dead. So again, like, he doesn't mention the Chidori, he simply says the Sharingan. So this just goes to show that like the limit that he has when it comes to speed. You know what I mean? He's not prime weightlessly or anything like that. He needs the Sharingan and in combination with the Chidori and even remotely to survive against Gaara. You know, it's not because like the Chidori is giving him a crazy, insane speed amp or whatever, you know, and all that thing, or because he has like, you know, Gates level of speed and power and so on and so forth. And another thing, just to further like conclude this overall like you know, general consensus of it, is Kakashi even says like you only have enough chakra to emit 2 Chidori a day. Chidori is a jutsu you can only use jointly with the Sharingan in a battle situation, and using the Sharingan and another jutsu at the same time, it's like combusting and expending all of your body's chakra at once. So, and he says, but you're still amazing. Even if I use 4 Chidori or Raikiri at the same day, I'll use up all of my chakra. So utilizing the Chidori is very, very taxing on your chakra and stamina reserves. Okay. And he literally tells him, like, don't ever try to overdo it, because if you do, then the jutsu would not work and your chakra would just be drained to 0. Okay. So again, like with him utilizing the Chidori, that is drastically affecting his chakra, especially in combination of using the Sharingan. So mind you, like, that's just further evidence that this Sasuke is not at full power, you know, and so on and so forth. And this is important because we've seen Lee, when he was in the Forrest of Death and fought whatever, he wasn't at full power when he was in the preliminary tuning exams, yet we see all the crazy and impressive feats that he's able to do at weightless level, and how fast he was and how capable he was. So even Lee was suffering from fatigue, yet he was still perfectly fine and performed even better than Sasuke against Gaara, you know, and so on and so forth. So again, just kind of want to put that out there. And the icing on the cake, if you guys are just still not convinced, like Naruto, who's also not at full power, fatigued, is able to speed blitz and kick Gaara in the face when he was trying to kill Sasuke and go at full speed. Like, he's able to intervene and hit him. Sakura as well, who is there, and Gaara knows she is there. He goes to launch at Sasuke again, and Sakura is able to use his speed and get there and try to like protect Sasuke. So if Sakura and Naruto are fast enough to get in front of Sasuke to try to protect, again, this is his blatant consistency and showing that Naruto, you know what I mean, is within the same speed ballpark of this particular Sasuke in the tuning exams, which would, again, be bare minimum around like weighted Lee level, or whatever ambiguous quantification level of like Sasuke approaching the weightless spectrum, right? So they're all within a similar speed ballpark is what I'm getting at. Tamari, Kankuro, Naruto, Sakura, and even Sasuke. Final scaling to present, basically in correlation of Naruto and Sasuke, and then which directly connects to Lee, and you guys will basically see why it all connects. And it's just a simple chain scaling, but we do get a pretty decent time skip, you know, to where Naruto trains and whatnot, develops the Rasengan and gets slightly stronger. Ambiguously, we don't know how far, but you know, we don't have any quantification, but he did like stronger to some regard, right? Same thing with Sasuke. He also, you know, like has a time skip, whatever. He's training, he's trying to get stronger. And he's even having like flashbacks of like Naruto, and he's even like scared of his power, and it's showing like QBI Naruto and whatnot, where like the Naruto that had mental amps and stuff that was able to defeat Gaara and so on and so forth, you know. So he's reflected on all that. And if you count the anime as well, there's a filler arc to where they also both go on a mission, and they're basically, you know, fighting like this one dude, and they're kind of going at it and whatnot, and then Sasuke lost, but Naruto was able to beat him. So like, again, like there's all that going on, which is basically what builds up to like Sasuke being really pissed off at Naruto, because he's starting to feel inferior to him, and he doesn't like the fact that how Naruto is actually becoming stronger than him. So that's like one thing that basically occurs. And the first instance we see is like they start fighting on the rooftop, they're equal to each other. You know, Sasuke's fighting all Naruto's clones. And this is like really important because Naruto does the same feat in the tuning exams where he summons a bunch of clones. And Neji literally just deals with all of them easily. Like, he's dealing with all of them, he can't get hit. And he even speed blitzed the original Naruto user. Because again, there's like a severe gap of like Neji and Naruto and Sasuke. And we all know that Neji was at least like skills to like the second gate at most, right? So it's very impressive, but the reason why it's relevant is because Sasuke is struggling to Naruto's shadow clones. He's using the Sharingan as well, And he's like, he got a couple shadow clones, but then he gets like launched into the air, and he has to like fight in the air and defend himself, and so on and so forth. And then the fight continues on. We know what happens. They have like a Rising on a Shidori clash. But the reason why that's important is because Kakashi's like, hey, like, you know, the size of the Shidori you aim, that's not the one that you would normally aim at a friend from a village. Are you actually trying to kill Naruto? You know, and then when Sasuke sees like how much damage Naruto did to the water tank compared to him, he's like, what is that? Like, what happened? And then he slams his fist on the wall, and he's like, Naruto, how far have you gone? And this is a consistent thing in the narrative. Whenever Naruto is surpassing Sasuke or even above him, he actually gets really emotional and pissed off. And we've seen this in Shippuden, like where Naruto like is in Caesium 2 and Sasuke starts clenching his fists, like he's like, how far will you go, Naruto? And then when Naruto does like Sage Mode with Caesium 2 as well, he gets even more pissed off, and he's like, I can't believe he can control all this chakra, whatever, blah, blah. Like, how far will you go? And he says it again, you know, like, so like there's consistency of when like Sasuke just flat out admits inferiority. So there's that as well. And even like Kakashi just reinforces this and says like, you know, Jiraiya, like he could have killed Sasuke with the Rising Gun. Like, why would you teach him that technique, you know? So there's all that. And then Kakashi even explains to Jiraiya, it's like, you know, basically Sasuke is, you know, he senses a change in Naruto and is feeling inferior, and he feels at risk of being left behind. Naruto has indeed become strong. So even Kakashi like acknowledges like what Naruto is capable of and how far he's gotten in comparison to Sasuke. So this is just like blatantly just like very simple and straightforward. Naruto is like stronger than Sasuke. And it takes for, you know, and that's like, and this eventually even leads up to the whole reason why Sasuke even leaves the village, because he wants to obtain and seek more power, you know, and go like the Orochimaru route. So eventually, as we further get into it, then we see like where Shikamaru's having a plan with like the Konoha squad to basically retrieve Sasuke, and he flat out says that like, Choji, like you're fourth up, you don't have speed, but you have the greatest striking power, you know, and so on and so forth, and you can work along with Kiba and Naruto. And then he says, Neji, finally bringing up with the rear guard is the toughest job out of all, but with your Bakugan, you can ensure that the squad has no blind spots, and because he is the fastest of the bunch and the strongest, that's why Shikamaru's given him the hardest position. So, and that eventually is reinforced further on as we'll bring up other feats. Another thing also to bring into particular is we also see Saikon talking with Sasuke, and he's explaining about like how the curse mark works and how like, you know, state 1 and state 2 is, and to control the power of the second, take some pellets, and then over extended period, and you'll be able to achieve the power. And when you achieve your new state, you will probably gain a power equal to ours. So it could either be equal to theirs or even like weaker and below. So, and that's what's like what basically Sasuke said, Saikon says in what's in question. And this is also consistent and eventually shown throughout all the fights with the Sound 4 as well, and even Sasuke's fight with Naruto. So like he's also correct in that as well, which you'll eventually see what I mean on that and what it leads. Basically, just to continue this further, before I get further into the Retrieval Arc feats of talking about Sasuke and Naruto and Neji, and basically how that corresponds to Lee and his scaling and overall, just to blatantly show the speed discrepancy between Lee and those individuals. Another thing before, you know, because I did mention I was going to talk about this, the only downfall of Rock Lee that he like unfortunately was really bad with was when it came to like combat and intelligence and strategizing. And what I mean by that, as we mentioned way back then and before, like if Rock Lee would just use like a paper bomb with a kunai, which mind you, he has the ninja equipment, so there's no excuse. You know, Naruto could do it. Naruto does it against like the V2, you know, Gaara transformation at his weak point, and we know the sand armor has tons and tons of weak points and is weaker than V2. You know what I mean? So like, all Lee had to do with like his weightless speed, you know what I mean? Like he could have literally just put a paper bomb in a kunai and then just stab fucking Gaara and then bam, blow him up in his face. And he basically could have created like a Datara win-con moment to where when like Datara used like the C1 explosion to like Gaara's like face point blank and then it knocked out Gaara, he could have done the same exact move and literally knocked out Gaara and defeated Gaara right there and then with like just weightless speed alone, you know? But, you know, because Lee is a ding-dong and not intelligent, he doesn't do that. He just beats the fuck out of him, and then basically like he's not really getting anywhere, you know, and that's basically what you're working with. Like it just, unfortunately, you know, nothing happens. Like he's just like at a gamble situation at a stalemate to where they're both just starting to get fatigued and they're not really getting anywhere. And then Lee's like, all right, let me use the primary Lotus. The armor of sand won't be able to stand up to that, and even Guy reinforces that, and then we see what happens and it goes from there, you know? So like overall, like that's just one other example that you have. And then another example, like when Lee goes into the 3rd and 4th gate and he's like has that crazy amount of power to where like he's perception blitzing everyone, Kakashi needs a 3 Tomo, Neji's shitting his pants, and like he's like, oh my god, like he's so strong, whatever. You know, and like Lee's in like in a whole other freaking dimension. Nobody can see him. Like that's how fast he is, and he even like blew up the entire stadium. Like this level of power, we've never seen this demonstrated by anyone in the Konoha 12. Nobody. Okay, remind you. But like when he does his power, he has the ability to launch Gaara all the way in the air, despite him weighing a fuck ton because of all the sand armor and whatnot. Okay, because that's why he couldn't lift him up with the first gate. You know, he lifts him up immediately and is bullying him. All he had to do, again, is just use paper bombs. And he could have defeat Gaara right then and then. Like, right there and then. And even without the paper bomb strategy, he doesn't even have to do that. He could have literally, instead of just launching Gaara, like, straight down and utilizing the laws of physics to even, like, enhance further AP on the blunt force trauma, all he had to do was literally just send Gaara straight down on his head. Like, just, like, kick his head down and kick his body to where he lands directly on his head and not on his back with the gore, you know? Like, that's all he could have done. He could have done that. He could have either, like, he could have done, like, a leg lock on Gaara's, like, head and neck and just forced him going all the way straight down and bam, kill him with all his power and AP. He could have literally also, like, basically took the gourd off Gaara. Like, he could have just grabbed the gore and threw it. Because, like, that's the thing, like, too. Like, the gore is, like, you know, you don't know what it could do, right? Or what it could be capable of. Like, why even take a risk or a gamble, you know? It's like, again, like, there's just so many ways Lee could have went about that fight to actually defeat Gaara, because he had the power and the AP to do it, at least against the sand armor. He just didn't have the AP and power to do it against the sand walls, you know, or like a sand dome, you know? So that's one of the issues that does occur with Rock Lee. And so, like, that's one of his downfalls, unfortunately. Like, when it comes to his intellect and battle IQ and combat analysis, you know, like, he's unfortunately one of those characters that can literally use, like, he has incredible power, but he's not smart with that incredible power. That's the issue, you know? While compared to other characters, like, if we had, like, someone like Kakashi, Minato, Itachi, whatever, they would be doing things like that in character. They would utilize the crazy amount of power they have and then use their intelligence on top of it to guarantee a win-con scenario, you know? So, and again, there's just no excuse for Rock Lee. Like, Shikamaru's using all his ninja equipment. Naruto even does it, and we know he's a ding-dong and a goofball. Sasuke does it many times. Sakura even does it. Like, there's, again, just no excuse whatsoever. So, that's one thing I wanted to bring up. If Lee did have the intelligence capacity and was bloodlusted in that regard, and he was able to incorporate those strategies, he would also be able to defeat someone like Gaara, Sasuke, Naruto, etc., the whole nine, just tremendously easier, and not even having to resort to, like, lotus attacks, you know, or just utilizing, like, his full AP and power with the gates and stuff, or his weightless ability, you know? So, again, just want to put that out there, but, you know, that's about it. But we can get back to the retrieval. We get further feats with Naruto and the Gennin squad, and again, this all correlates to Sasuke and also Rock Lee as well, and it's just a simple chain scaling is what I'm getting at. But we see Naruto trying to attack the Spider-Man dude from behind, and the Spider-Man guy is still able to respawn and block his attack. And then, not only that, like, Kiba says that this guy is tougher than the big guy earlier, which he was referring to Jirobo, and he says, like, a lot tougher. And Jirobo was considered the weakest. That was even stated by, like, his own comrades that he was the weakest, and so on and so forth. And Kiba just flat out says it outright, because Kiba and Akamaru had the ability to sense the enemy's strength through their chakra and everything. And Kiba just says it in this scan as well. He's like, he has the ability to sniff out an enemy's chakra. He can smell the magnitude of the enemy's strength. So the fact that he's that spooked is a bad sign, and so on and so forth. So, like, there's that also into consideration. And most importantly, as it gets further on, the Spider-Man dude even acknowledges Neji is the strongest of the group. So, like, again, there's this further consistency and reinforcement, and this is all going back to the whole thing of where, like, Neji's beyond all these people, Naruto, Sasuke, you name it, you know, and then Rock Lee was above Neji, right, you know? So that's, like, basically what I'm getting at, and we just see this constantly being reinforced, even with the villains that they're fighting and the people that they're going up against. And then eventually, like, with how strong Neji was with the conclusion outcome of the fight, even the Spider-Man dude says he's the first to drive me this far ever since Kimimaro, which is referring to the Bone Man. And that guy is the strongest of the Sound 4, mind you, or the Sound 5, technically, okay? And that's really important because we actually see direct scaling when it comes to Kimimaro when he's eventually fighting Lee. So again, we're just getting constant reinforcement and constant consistency that Neji and Lee are actually people that are on the level of Kimimaro, while everyone else in the Konoha 12, like Naruto, Sasuke, Shikamaru, etc., you name it, they're all on the level of fighting the other Sound 4 members, such as Taiya, Saikon, Jirobo, and things like that. And the Spider Dude was on the level of Neji, when it at least came to like his, you know, jutsus and attacking from range, and nobody else could deal with him because the spider guy was able to subdue the entire squad. Neji was the only one that could fight him. And the spider guy even admits like inferiority to Neji. He says like close hand-to-hand combat's a no-no, and that's why he has to start like fighting from a distance or utilize his web jutsu activation speed, which is faster than his body, and so on and so forth. Which again, this makes sense and follows through, especially along with the skin I even said way back then before, where Neji had the toughest job because he was the fastest, and while Choji was fourth up and it was the slowest, you know, and then Naruto and Kiba could back him up, whatever you name it. So like, there's just constant consistency and reinforcement that Neji and Lee are known as speedsters, and they're just known to be the strongest because of it, you know? So, just kind of want to put that out there. And then the next thing we even get to, we just have further establishment and consistency where, again, Saikon's able to block Naruto with his Rasengan and grab it. And he's like, it's pointless if I get your hand first. You know, Kimamaru eventually shows up as well. He's able to speed blitz Naruto and Shikamaru. And he was so fast, they couldn't even respond to be fast enough to stop him from taking the barrel. And this we see even further proof because eventually, as it goes on, Naruto tries to get the barrel back or stop them, but Tayuya just like punches him in the face, showing that they scale to each other and whatnot, you name it. And even Shikamaru has like a full-on death battle with that Tayuya as well. And he fights her in the base, CM1 and CM2, remind you. And Kimamaru, this is just further reinforced that the Bone Man is like above the Sound 4, to where he says, I won't kill you, Tayuya, so you can live to fulfill your mission or whatever. I'll leave these pests to you. So he doesn't even acknowledge the other ones. He also thinks they're weak and whatnot. And it's because they're on the same level as Tayuya, you know. And we eventually get even further reinforcement and consistency in all these feats when we eventually get to the Kyuubi Naruto fight against Kimamaru, and then eventually in correlation to Rock Lee and what he is able to do in his performance again, Bone Man as well. So then we have the Kyuubi Naruto fight against Kimamaru, and mind you, this man goes straight to Kyuubi mode because his base was inferior to Bone Man. Okay, so he couldn't fuck with with Kimamaru, which is a taijutsu specialist as well, and also has like ninjutsu and his Kenkai with his bone ability and whatnot. So like Naruto even concedes and knows that his base wouldn't be able to do anything, so he goes straight to Kyuubi mode to amp himself. Okay, then he summons thousands of shadow clones. Okay, which is ridiculous against him, which is also very important because we do know that the shadow clones can help compensate for a speed difference as well. That's like illustrated in the Kakazu fight where Naruto's like, okay, I need 2 shadow clones in order to make up for the speed discrepancy because of like his range attacks with his tentacles and whatnot, so we do know that the shadow clones do help with that. They can also be utilized as diversions, to create time intervals, distractions, whatever you name it. And still, this Kyuubi Naruto was not able to land a single blow. And it gets even more impressive. We get further in feats for Kimamaru, which is just even more impressive, to where Naruto adds a Kyuubi cloak on top of it. So not only is he doing the Kyuubi amp and summoning thousands of clones with the mental amp as well. Okay, it's kind of similar to like the Gaara fight all over again, basically. Okay, he also puts a chakra cloak on top of it, which this is something he did against Neji, but he just didn't go into the Kyuubi enhanced state. He only just added the chakra cloak. So he's getting 2 amps in this particular situation. And a chakra cloak is very impressive because not only does it rejuvenate your body, like it heals your wounds and, from your fatigue and whatnot, but it also like makes you pretty strong and amplifies your body and your physical stats. Like we see it where he's able to be equal to a fatigued Neji. Neji was bullying him the entire fight, spamming all his abilities, his rotation, and, his gentle fist and his 64 palms. And then Naruto does the Nine Tails chakra, heals and everything, and rejuvenates, his stamina and whatnot. And then he's equal to that Neji because of the amp that he had. And Neji still won while he was fatigued, remind you, but it's still impressive. So like this Naruto has 2 amps, and Bone Man can utilize his jutsu activation, stab all the clones, and Naruto couldn't land a single blow on that particular character. And it's literally to the point where Naruto even acknowledges his power, and even he just flat out like says it. He's like, man, this guy is strong. 1 blow against all of those shadow clones, and it was just him left. And Bone Man is like, all right, 1 more left to go, And then basically, like, we know what happens. Like, Sasuke gets out of the barrel, Naruto calms down, he's in his base or whatever, and he's trying to reason with Sasuke, but then Sasuke doesn't listen to him and he leaves. And then that's when the GOAT, aka Rock Lee, intervenes and saves Naruto from being killed, because again, Naruto's base did not scale to kill him. In the next feat that we see, as I was referring to before, the GOAT Lee shows up, and he's able to speed blitz Bone Man, and he basically hits him directly in front, remind you. Okay, he doesn't hit him from behind or the side or whatever, so a lot of people try to always claim that, oh, this is an off-guard hit, which it's not. And again, plenty of ninja are also, consistently-wise, have always been able to respond to attacks while they're like in their home and not even in battle situations, or in battle situations from behind or on the side or whatever you name it. And it's even worse to try to even argue that this is an off-guard hit. It's because Rock Lee literally is attacking in front of him. Kimimaro like moves to kill Naruto from behind, and then Lee just gets in front and then kicks him away, and he couldn't respond fast enough. And then he's like, who, you know? So like Rock Lee's already speed blitzing him, and this is a Rock Lee in his weightless form, okay? No gates, no nothing, just in base with his weightless. Impressive feats that we get to see with Rock Lee is he then, when he appears to save Naruto, Kimimaro acknowledges his power as well. And in the manga, he says he's not as easy as others, but in the anime, he actually states, not only in the dub, but also in the sub, that he's stronger than the others, that he is strong. You know, and that's actually a really big deal, because this Kimimaro has seen Kyuubi Naruto, he's seen base Naruto and Shikamaru, and yet when he sees Rock Lee, he's like, oh yeah, like this guy is actually stronger, like he's not as easy as the others, or he's stronger than the others. And one thing as well, I'm not going to get into it. Eventually, that will be for a separate video and as a different discussion when it comes to like translations and how translations work in Naruto. But just to keep it very brief and simple, if the anime ever corrects the translation in the manga, because there is rare instances where the manga translation is incorrect, because they do have like 3 people, official translators in 3 different roles to make sure everything is correct and accurate in the manga, and then they'll make everyone review the work and make sure it's all reflecting exactly the same as the manga. But if it's not the same as the manga, then that was because it was an incorrect translation. And we see some instances like that. We see it with Killer Bee, where he says, like, in the manga, he says, like, he says Sasuke is the strongest opponent, but we know Minato was, you know what I mean? And in the anime, it says that Sasuke was the second toughest opponent, you know? And that's more consistent with the narrative and etc. and feats, whatever you name it, right? Same thing happens in part 1 of Naruto with, you know, when it comes to like Orochimaru and Kabuto talking about the Sound 4, and also when it comes to the Bone Man talking about Rock Lee and comparing to, you know, all the others, and so on and so forth, which is like Kyuubi Naruto, and Shikamaru. So again, this is very, very impressive for Rock Lee, because Kimimaro flat out says he's either just not as easy as the others, you know, which still means that he's better and stronger than the others, or just flat out says he is stronger than the others, you know? So again, that's a really big deal. And when we see the manga feats as well, like they both move at the same time, they move forward at each other, they're both trying to fight each other, and none of them are landing blows on each other, whatnot. And then in the anime only, there is additional detail. We actually get additional feats where Rock Lee is able to land multiple attacks on Kimimaro. So there's that as well. Just to show like the anime feats as well, like this way if you guys like were like, oh no, you're tripping or whatever, like these are the feats as well. Like he's able to kick him in his body, he's able to land a kick on his shoulder, he's able to kick him again in the body and the chest, and then he's also able to uppercut Kimimaro as well. So like he literally outperforms him, and mind you, he's in base and this is weightless Lee. Okay, and then to finally tie everything in for like the Rock Lee scaling and in correlation to everyone with the Konoha 12 and him being the strongest, like we then eventually see him drink the, you know, the potion, which makes him drunk, and he like unlocks the drunken fist in taijutsu. And Kimimaro sees it, he's like, oh, it's made the boy loopy, so he's like all weird and drunk and whatnot. And for some reason as well, like there's a misconception that people try to argue that like this made Lee stronger and faster, but there's actually nothing to prove that. All we do know is that he drinks alcohol, gets drunk, and then he just becomes unpredictable, and he's just utilizing the speed and stats that he already retained and had that he was even performing against Kimimaro, because that's before, without the drunken fist, he was still landing attacks or fighting and going at it equally with Kimimaro, you know? So like overall, like it's very consistent from what we see before when he's like in his weightless base form, and there's just nothing to substantiate or show that he got like stronger or faster. So I don't know why like people normally make those claims, or but that's, again, it's always been like a misconception with that. And it just makes further sense because like as we see the further feats, you know, Kimimaro, like he says, I can't read his moves. He hit me. That taijutsu is something else. Like he doesn't say like, oh, like whatever he drank made him faster and stronger. He just simply says he can't read his moves because he's unpredictable, which makes sense. He's drunk, you know what I mean? And he even like acknowledges that his taijutsu is like really great, you know what I mean? Which we already knew because he's performing really good without the drunken fist. And then he even says, I'm left with no choice, and he starts using partial CM1 to amplify his stats and like his jutsu speed activation. And then he's finally able to actually speed blitz Drunken Fist Lee to where he's actually faster, you know, because he had to use CM1. So that's the first thing. And then this is even more impressive because this Rock Lee, remind you, came out of surgery. You know, Sanade says his surgery was a success, and if he's limited to jutsu training, he could start as early as tomorrow, but it wouldn't hurt to take it easy for a while, you know. And then then there's like some other ninja that come in and like be like, oh, Lee's gone or whatever, blah blah, and then the guy starts freaking out like no, because he really wants him to recover and to continue being a ninja, you know. And as we further get on, this is further substantiated because even Lee himself concedes and says like, my job is to hold him as long as I can, so I guess I should avoid any moves big enough to well kill me, because he's not in like a you know, full prime peak state. He's like, I just got out of surgery, so I can't go too crazy, but maybe I can open one of the 8 inner gates if it's just the first one, the first gate of opening, and then that's when he does the first gate and tries to do the Lotus. And even Kimaru, like, he has to use CM1 partial and use Jutsu speed activation, and he like literally like stops the kick, and he says impressive speed, but it stops here. So like again, like Rock Lee is just insane. Like, he's not even at max full power, and with gate 1, okay, and Drunken Fist with the weightless stats that he already had, okay, Kimaru had to use a partial CM1 amp and then use his bone jutsu activation to defend himself. Kind of like similar to basically what Sasuke does when he's using Susanoo against V2 Raikage, you know, because V2 Raikage was faster, so he does Susanoo, which is just as fast, and he also does like the Amaterasu flames, you know, whatnot. Like, he's strictly on defense, and that's basically what Kimaru is doing here. He's using his jutsu activation speed and also utilizing the CM1 partial amp, which is like, you know, artificial sage mode, you know. So like, that's very, very impressive for Rock Lee. Because basically what this demonstrates is we know Weightless Lee was like equal to base Kimaru, right? You know, and landing multiple blows. Then when Lee goes Drunken Fist, he becomes unpredictable, and he's beating him up, so he has to use like the partial CM1 and become faster to deal with Lee. And then when Lee does the Gate 1, which is like a significant speed amp, okay, like which makes him typically a speed blitz tier above the people he fights, he was beyond base Kimaru, and Kimaru had to use CM1 partial jutsu activation again. You know, so like his Gate 1 and his Drunken Fist state was superior to base Kimaru, while his weightless state was on the same level of Bone Man, you know. And again, this is just extremely impressive because if we correlate, you know, to everything that we see before, it's just crazy. Basically, just like to conclude like this overall on the general consensus for you guys, like Rock Lee is able to perform better than QB Naruto with the mental amp in his QB state and with a chakra cloak on top of it, okay. And Kimaru just flat out says that he's stronger than the others, you know, or he's not as easy as the others, you know, and that he's basically over all those versions that he's seen before, which is base Naruto, Shikamaru, and QB Naruto, along with all the other things I already said. You know, and that's Weightless Lee. And mind you, he's not at max prime power. You know what I mean? He was, you know, and this is like further like reinstated and shown because Gaara, okay, even says to Lee, like, you were faster and sharper than when we last fought. So he's not even at full power. He's weaker, you know? So there's that to put into consideration, and then Gaara literally stops him from fighting, and he says, you're in no shape to fight. I will handle this, you know? So, like, again, like, Rock Lee, like, all the feats and everything that he performs against Kimaru, it just flat out objectively shows that he's clearly severely above people like Naruto, Sasuke, Shikamaru, Choji, Kiba, you name it, okay, when it comes to speed discrepancy and AP and power and taijutsu. Like, he's just blatantly above, and that's his weightless state. This is him without the gates, remind you, okay? Because when he does Gate 1, he forces Kimaru to have to use CM1 partial transformation, okay, and then use his jutsu activation with the bones, okay? So, again, like, you know, this Lee is beyond base Kimaru, okay, when he's using Gate 1 or the Drunken Fist, and Weightless Lee is equal to matters, guys. It's because this directly correlates to the final amount of feats that we have, which is like literally like at this point, if you still don't believe like Lee is that guy, like the final amount of feats and like everything that we have is literally when Naruto and Sasuke fight in the Final Valley, and like they're both equal in base stats, you know what I mean? Like they're both going at it or whatever. They do the Rising Gun and Shidori clash. Like Sasuke has to do like, you know, like then activate CM1, do like jutsu combos and whatnot to create an opening. He even like flat out admits like he can't risk a stalemate and whatnot, you know. Then we see like Naruto do the whole QB thing, goes QB mode. Sasuke is still able to react, but he's getting overpowered. you know, and then he starts getting like speed blitzed multiple times as well by Naruto. So like he's just getting beat up, right? And then he was subdued, and then Sasuke unlocks 3 Tomo. You know, now he's like able, because of precog, he's able to see Naruto's movements and whatnot, and like he's actually beating up Naruto, and the tables are turned, right? And then he defeats Naruto. Then Naruto goes to the One Tail, okay? And then we see that, you know, and then he's still able to react to Naruto, remind you, but he's getting overpowered. And then like the chakra branching is what Sasuke is not able to see with his precog, so that's what's actually is tagging him and hitting him over and over. He even activates CM1. He's still getting beat up, and he even like this flat out says like all he can do is dodge, you know. And then we see the legendary like next transformation when he goes into the CM2, okay, and then that's when they have like their final clash and they go at it from there or whatever, you know. And the reason why this is all important, like just to make this very like simple and general consensus, is because if this Naruto and Sasuke, like if their base are equal, whatever, with everything that we already talked about and discussed and shown in the video, this Rock Lee weight list would be definitely blatantly above 3 Tomo and 2 Tomo Sasuke, okay? And definitely above base Naruto and definitely above QB Naruto, okay? And then one thing that does become questionable is then discussing One Tail Naruto and CM2 Sasuke. And all I will say with this, as a general consensus, and I'll even show like the scans with everything that I've been referencing, so you guys can take the time to look over it and pause the video if you need to. All the scans that I basically have, like everything that occurs in the Final Valley fight. You know, at the end of the day, it's like if Rock Lee is blatantly above their base forms, right? And then they do, and then like Naruto does his QB state, and Rock Lee is even above that, okay? You know, and then we see like the 3 Tomo is in the similar scaling of QB Naruto and One Tail Naruto. And he could literally like react, dodge, whatever you name it. It's not until like One Tail until Naruto's doing the branching where he's getting overwhelmed, because it has like its own mind of its own. But overall, the main point being said, like 2 Tomo Sasuke and 3 Tomo Sasuke are in the QB Naruto level, right? And Rock Lee's above that, okay? Mind you, weightlist wise too, like without the gates, you know, without Drunken Fist, you know. So like that's like the issue. Like Rock Lee's blatantly above. You know, and then you give like Sasuke the CM2 form, which he can only be in that form for like a very tiny bit, like it's for one moment. I mean, he just flat out says like it's already eating me away, like I have no time at all, and I have to like end this now, you know. And so he does like his Chidori, whatever. He literally can only be in CM2 and do 2 moves. He does 1 Chidori, and then he does like 1 you know, final strike against One Tail Naruto, and Naruto goes to scratch his headband because, you know, Sasuke said he wouldn't be able to scratch it or whatever, and he was being like stubborn, you know, instead of just also knocking him out and making a stalemate, you know. So overall, like that's kind of the issue. Like basically, like with even like with their transformations, which do amp them to some like ambiguous like or like some unknown regard, like the amps are clearly not even significant because Sasuke could still react to the transformations, like he could still scale and, you know, and be relative basically, you know, and he only had to go to CM2 in order to actually like, you know, be finally equal to One Tail Naruto. But his 3 Tomo form, you know, even CM1 was relative to One Tail Naruto, you know, and his 3 Tomo, you know, was also relative to QB Naruto, but he was only able to be superior and dominate him because he could see all of his moves and just aim dodge everything, you know. Remember, if you guys remember, it goes back all the way to that statement of what Rock Lee said, to where like even if your eye is able to see everything, it doesn't matter if your body's too weak and too slow to react and respond. So like we see that QB Naruto was like beating up CM2 Sasuke, was beating up 2 Tomo Sasuke, you know what I mean? And like, and he only like reacted once, but consistency wise, like all Naruto's moves, he was getting beat up. But then once he gets 3 Tomo, now he can respond to him, you know what I mean? So like, so again, it's like, you know, Sasuke was relative to QB Naruto, and then when he gets 3 Tomo, now he's like, you know, basically equal and has the advantage and can just beat him up because he can see everything he can do, you know? And then it just goes from there, and Naruto gets One Tail, and that Sasuke can still respond and react to everything. And then with like a CM2 amp, a Chidori amp, hypothetically as well, and One Tail Naruto is still equal. Basically, from everything we see within that fight, is there's plenty of evidence to suggest that their transformations are not like significant and not crazy strong, you know. And this could be for many reasons. For one, like they're not that great at chakra control at this point in the story as well. And then 2, most importantly, you know, like, yeah, there's the statement that everyone's going to bring up about, like, oh, like, the curse mark's a 10 times multiplier or whatever. But really, when you actually analyze Naruto, it really technically isn't, you know, or it's because, again, like, their chakra control is to show shit, they can't even make full use of, like, the large amount of chakra they get. And we see this because with all the sound form members, like they're fighting like the Konoha getting in like their base forms, then they do CM1, they're still fighting. Then they go to CM2 and they're still fighting against them. And like they're still equal and having a competitive fight. So like you're telling me like if it was like if they're like 10 times more powerful, they should be blitzing or destroying, you know, the opponent that they're already like equal or relative to, you know? So again, it just doesn't follow through and it doesn't make any logical sense. And then as for like, you know, CM2 Sasuke, and along with the Chidori and everything, like he just, again, he scales to One-Tail Naruto. And that One-Tail Naruto, okay, was, you know, that Sasuke was relative to One-Tail Naruto. So like, overall, it's just all this chain scaling. And if there's similar scaling between them, even when they're going to like their next transformation or whatever, really all that's happening is Naruto just gets like certain benefits and perks with the cloak. He gets like, you know, cloak protection, he has chakra branching, like its own mind of its own. It's like fighting two people basically. You know, he has range attacks now. Like that's really all it is. Like the stats, the physical stats doesn't really change. Like there's nothing to prove that or even substantiate. The only thing you could technically argue against Naruto is that he's holding back against Sasuke because he doesn't want to kill him, you know? But he could still incapacitate him and he could still knock him out, you know? So like overall, like it just, again, it's like really, really hard to try to prove or argue that even CM2 Sasuke or One-Tail Naruto is like blatantly superior to Rock Lee, like, you know, when it comes to him utilizing all his gates and whatnot. And even the cherry on the top, like, it's just stated outright that Rock Lee is dozens of times stronger when he's using the gates, you know? So, like, it's like, even if you grant the 10 times multiplier for the CM2, or even if you say, like, One-Tail Naruto is also, like, a 10 times multiplier, potentially, because, you know, he's scaling to CM2 Sasuke, like, it's like, okay, well, Rock Lee is dozens of times stronger. That's way more than the amps that they have. You know what I mean? So, like, he would still be more powerful, and he would just, you know, outspeed them, and then just kill them with, like, you know, taijutsu and so on and so forth. So, like, that's basically what you're working with, guys. Like, you know, at the end of the day, bare minimum, all I will say, I will be generous to One-Tail Naruto. We don't really get to see what he's fully capable of because, he's not going, like, completely all out and trying to kill Sasuke. So, for all we know, maybe if he's, like, bloodlusted or whatever, then he would just dog wash fucking Rock Lee. You know, that's it. But we can at least say for certain that CM2 Sasuke, though, who was trying to, like, defeat Naruto, you know, and go all out, okay, he clearly, very, very clearly, would be below Rock Lee, you know, and that's based upon, like, everything you see with all these feats on the screen, with everything that we discussed before, all the chain scaling, everything, the Retrieval Arc. Guys, basically, just to conclude this video, Rock Lee is very, very, very strong and powerful. A lot of people don't give him the credit that he deserves. A lot of people don't even analyze him correctly within the story. And people just really just don't understand the character. He's a very misunderstood character. He's extremely powerful, has incredible feats, incredible statements. And when you analyze even the Konoha 12 and everything they're capable of, all the feats they're able to do, the Retrieval Arc, you name it, etc., and so on and so forth, even in the shooting exams, you name it, there's clearly a severe gap in power and there's a big speed discrepancy. And really the only thing remotely that you could even say that could either potentially be able to give Lee a run for his money or defeat him is when we're talking about like the higher forms of like CM2 Sasuke or One-Tail Naruto. I feel like, again, as I said before, I think CM2 Sasuke, it's like you can't prove that at all. But at least Naruto, you can give him the benefit of the doubt because he wasn't bloodlusted and trying to kill Sasuke, you know. So again, that's basically what you're working with for the most part. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like the damn video, comment your thoughts down below. Let me know if everything that was presented in this video, if you have any disagreements, agreements, whatever, you name it. How far do you gauge Rock Lee? Do you think he's, you know, really powerful or strong or a lot stronger than people give him credit for? Do you think he's the strongest of the Konoha 12? You name it. So, like, overall, I hope you guys really enjoyed. And sorry for the video, it was pretty lengthy, but I really, really wanted to dissect Rock Lee as a character and really just go over, like, all the common misconceptions, how really strong he is, to all the debunks for like the Sasuke scaling and all the weird stuff with that and you name it, and then just everything in correlation to how he is, you know, in comparison to the Konoha 12 and everyone, and even the final forms that we see in the final valley, which, you know, sets a whole other bar of power, right? You know, so as always, guys, if you guys enjoyed, I'll see you guys in the next one. And if you guys want more videos like this and more scaling, please hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next one. And I haven't decided yet, but I might post this video on my main channel. We will see, depending on how good it does here or the stats was. If it's not exactly how I want it to perform, then I'll just probably post it on my main channel just, you know, just to compare and see if anybody, watches it, there's still more or whatever. But at the end of the day, nothing's really going to change. I'm still going to be posting all my Naruto scaling videos on the Naruto YouTube channel. That's what it's for. But, and then for the main channel, that would just be like for reactions, debates, and anything else that's Naruto related that's not an official production scaling video. But as always, guys, GN15 is out. Peace.
やめろ。いいんだ、カカシ。俺はもうダメみたいだ。体の右側はほとんど潰れちまって感覚すら